Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Retail Perch. We're back here again with my co-host Gary, whose job is briefly threatened by Stephanie. And I think we're trying to make sure Gary feels secure that he is the permanent co-host of the
I don't
Retail
know.
Perch.
Stephanie's doing a great job.
Yeah, she certainly did. She did a great job. I mean, we had some terrific conversations over the last few weeks. And today we're back talking about technology. And as you guys know, the Retail Perch is all about talking about retail trends, mostly as it applies to the supermarket industry, talking about challenges, and trying to unpack some of the technology, demystifying all those things. If there's specific topics you want us to talk about, do email us, theretailperch@birdseye.com. And today, actually, we have a guest that I have known for several years. We followed this company right from pretty much the day they got started almost. And they've done an amazing job. So I won't take any more time, but I'll introduce here the CEO and founder of GrocerKey, Jeremy Neren. Hi, Jeremy. Welcome to the Retail Perch.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And, just for our listeners here, Jeremy, if you can take as much time as you need, just not the whole day. Talk about, where you came from, your roots, how did you wind up in the grocery industry and what motivated you to start GrocerKey?
Yeah. So I've been in e-commerce grocery for close to 16 years now. Prior to starting GrocerKey, I ran a on-demand grocery delivery service in Madison, Wisconsin for roughly a decade. We were essentially a business that now has very much become in vogue with the instant needs category. That there's so many businesses sprouting up now, offering a curated selection of grocery items and for delivery in 20 minutes or less. And that's very much what we were doing. But before it really became in vogue like it is today. So very similar to the models you're seeing from GoPuff and Joker and Getter and many others now. We were doing that just in one smaller college town market for close to a decade. We built all of our own technology, kind of learned everything from the ground up, everything from merchandising to how to operate out of what would now be characterized as a micro fulfillment center, just no automation, of course. And out of a desire to actually scale that business, I partnered up with the gentleman who became my co-founder for GrocerKey, Daniel Glucksman. He essentially became my technical counterpart. And we decided we wanted to scale that business by partnering with local grocery stores in college towns throughout the United States. And so we shifted from warehousing our own inventory to working with a mom and pop grocer in downtown Madison. And that retailer happened to have their own e-commerce business that they had been operating for a few years. And, this is going back to 2014. So many grocers were not even online at this point. And those that were kind of doing it to serve a very small subset of their customers, those that really needed e-commerce and needed local delivery. But there wasn't a whole lot of sophistication in their operation. And we got to witness that firsthand and felt like maybe there's a bigger opportunity to pivot and become effectively a B2B software company versus a direct-to-consumer business. And it can be debated if we made the right move from a business perspective, given all that's going on now. But for us, that was just really exciting because we felt like it was an opportunity to effectively partner with the Davids of the world being retailers, combating, the Goliaths, mainly Amazon, of course, at that time. And now, there could be some debate about others that have entered the space that pose a major threat to retailers. And so that was a really exciting opportunity for us. And we felt like it was one that we couldn't pass up on. So we pivoted the business and right out of the gate, we found a multi-billion-dollar retailer to partner with. And they invited us in to not only serve as a technology partner, but also an operations partner. And that was Woodman's Markets. And they asked us to come in and operate their e-commerce business. And that's kind of led to the evolution of GrocerKey over the years. And I think very much is what makes us unique as a technology company, having kind of equal parts technology and operations expertise.
Fantastic. So what were you doing before you got into the e-commerce space?
So I had just graduated from college. I went to UW-Madison. I was actually a history major. on a path to become a teacher. And I did work in a public high school in my hometown of St. Paul for close to a year after graduating, and just decided that wasn't for me. That wasn't my long-term path. And I had this idea in the back of my head to start the business that I eventually started in Madison, somewhat modeled after a business that was in Washington, D.C. By the name of DC Snacks, which no longer exists today. But, they were in the mold of, many others that came before them. A lot of people don't know that, but this whole instant needs category, it existed even going back to the mid 90s. You had a business by the name of Cosmo that started up in New York City and expanded to a number of different markets. And so I studied up all of those businesses and, became an entrepreneur just by researching and learning, which was, in many ways, that was my college background as a history major.
So did America lose a great teacher?
Lost a teacher, maybe not a great one.
That's a fascinating story. So somebody who's not even from technology, you studied history and you wanted to become a teacher and you started a tech company. That's a fantastic story right there.
Yeah, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
I'll write the history of e-commerce.
That's right.
There you go. There you go.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So, I know GrocerKey today. You guys announced recently you've been acquired. So congratulations. For most entrepreneurs, that's kind of like a fantastic landmark to reach, where you've built a company that you feel is met the product market fit and somebody thinks it's valuable enough to acquire. So congratulations to you and your team. So I know it's been a very interesting journey for you. So how has GrocerKey how have you seen the evolution of e-commerce since the day you guys started?
Obviously so much has changed, since 2014, and a lot of that's occurred, I would say, with the first milestone being, Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods, that led to huge transition. And then obviously over the last, 18 months plus COVID. But, we went from a business that was 1% to 2% to now being, double digits by most of the data that's out there. And so, when you see a kind of an order of magnitude like shift, obviously prioritization for grocers has shifted. And there's just a lot more focus on the kind of the finer details rather than simply trying to stand up an e-commerce site and seeing what comes of it. So I think it's more than anything a psychological shift among retailers who are, now our clients.
So Jeremy, from what you're seeing and, across the retailers that you work with, is e-commerce profitable now for grocery retailers, or are they still struggling to cross that line?
Yeah, so it really, to me, it depends where you're at in the journey. It absolutely can be profitable, but it takes a lot of focus on the smaller details. If you simply stand up a site and fulfill orders using labor in store and don't really look at the business comprehensively and focus on how to gain efficiencies at store, it's very difficult to make profitable because you're taking a fairly low margin business and you're adding incremental costs. That's not a great equation. But there are ways to really reduce costs, bring in new revenue streams. Obviously that's why we're seeing so much about digital media now, and focus on how your technology partner can assist you with maybe highlighting items that are, higher gross margin. So if you really focus on all of what might seem like minutia, but if you focus on all of that, and give it a lot of scrutiny, it is absolutely possible to be profitable, and it can be profitable without all of the bells and whistles you read about, like automated, micro fulfillment centers. You can run a profitable e-commerce business, fulfilling orders with, staff in store.
Yes. I'm sure a lot of grocery retailers will be glad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. It's a controversial topic, but I happen to believe, it's one that everyone should be optimistic about, but it takes time and iteration for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no question about the consumer demand for that, right? So I think the fact that the demand exists means that the grocers have to figure out a way to make it profitable if they want to continue to stay in business. And I guess what you're saying is the ones that figure out a way to make it profitable are the ones that are going to win out in the end, because as e-commerce share grows, it's going to shrink margin if you're not making it profitable for yourself. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think there are, retailers that are giving this, the attention it deserves. They're building internal teams, and they're giving the appropriate scrutiny to all the various elements of e-commerce. And those are the retailers that, I think are probably stacking the deck in their favor the most to, to be sustainable well into the future.
Yeah. So, a lot going on across the industry, a lot of talk about Instacart, what they're doing, where they may be going, et cetera. What are you hearing from the retailers you work with and talk with? How are they viewing Instacart? As a real partner or as a growing threat?
It's somewhat of a mixed bag. Obviously, if you read, industry folks, I guess myself and all of us, included, I think there is widespread concern, and I think that's warranted because, you're bringing in a partner who ultimately is going to be focused first and foremost on their consumer. And their consumer, in many times is what you would think is yours. So that creates a bit of a problem, of course. But I think it's largely about how you view them and how you partner with them. I think the retailers that have less concern are those that are approaching them more appropriately, at least in my eyes, as a source of incremental revenue, rather than an exclusive partner to run your entire e-commerce business. And so I think there is a major distinction there. I think the retailers that are utilizing marketplaces as a source of incremental revenue are generally happy. And those that are concerned are maybe the ones that have gotten a little bit ahead of themselves and partnered up a little too closely, and now they're behind the curve when it comes to having control of their own e-commerce site and their own staff operating the business to at least a degree.
That's a really interesting distinction that you bring about, because I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to, at the end of the day, have some degree of control over and access to your customer, and the more of that you outsource to a third party, the less they become your customer, I guess, at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah, and as we all know, that relationship with the customer is all important in retail, right? Especially grocery retail.
Yeah.
And I think following along behind that is the importance of digital engagement with shoppers. And I think any amount of that the traditional retailer cedes to a third party, certainly does not help their future.
Yeah. And I think that's the key. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's so much that can be done with the data, from a personalization standpoint, but also from a monetization standpoint. Yeah. And without that, I think you probably do relinquish control of your profitability. So as this becomes a bigger percentage of sales, you're moving in the wrong direction. And unfortunately, the marketplaces are, the beneficiary of all that. And so it's just a matter of striking the right balance, in my view. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from our clients as well.
Right. So in terms of, implementing, and I guess, it depends on the size of the retailer. If you're like a 1 to 5 store, 10 store chain, or you're a 100 store chain, it seems like data discipline has a lot to do with speed to market, right? So how well you're able to maintain your categorization, your product, your attribution information. And obviously from e-commerce perspective, it becomes incredibly important because a customer goes on a website, they want to see clean images, they want to see nice descriptions, they want to be able to search well. So have you seen some of that discipline kind of improve over the time as you've been in business, or are the challenges kind of at the same level as you go along?
Definitely improvement. I think everyone, myself included, and our clients included, I think everyone wants to see change faster. And I think there is still a big problem in the industry, everything from just getting updated images to product descriptions and attributes that, play a key role, obviously, in the, not just the e-commerce experience, but the digital experience. I think there still is a lot of work to be done. And this is part of I think a broader challenge of just the whole digital transformation of the industry. Is there's so many, third parties involved that all need to kind of be working in lockstep. And that's obviously, easier said than done.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. Every retailer has their own method of categorization, their own departments, and I mean, it's like
Yeah,
there's no standard out there. And I think
yeah,
if there's retailers listening out there, I think it's a good idea to maybe look at a standard that you like with, and try to have the discipline to stick with it. Because I've also seen retailers start with a standard and then diverge over time, and it's not kept up to date, or somebody is
Yeah.
just something slipped through the cracks, and then pretty soon you have a mess in your hands. And I can imagine if a retailer like that wants to have their own e-commerce solution implemented in-house, all these things come back to bite them, right? In
yeah,
terms of speed to going to market.
yeah. And it's an example of just another thing that I think warrants, a high degree of scrutiny. I mean, you can't be totally dependent upon a third party to solve a problem of this magnitude. They're not going to give you as an individual retailer, regardless of your size, the attention deserved, to really solve this problem.
So again, a lot of talk in the industry, a lot of activity around, fast and even faster delivery. Kroger and Instacart's partnership around 30-minute delivery. And let's see, I think it was Ahold also signed on with Instacart. Some of the big metro areas like New York, it seems like every other day you're reading about another startup, from GoPuff to Joker to Gorillas to whoever. Do you see that trend continuing? Do you think that is going to expand out to other markets, or is it going to be confined to just some of the biggest metro markets?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there's a lot there to analyze. I mean, there's been so much VC money poured into that space. It's hard to imagine it not continuing in a very meaningful way. And there is some consumer demand for that. I'm personally a little bit skeptical about the degree of consumer demand, and I think eventually that will lead to probably some level of consolidation in that space and a focus on certain geographies where it can truly, be commercialized in a sustainable way. But I do think it undoubtedly plays a role in the broader ecosystem. It's just a matter of, to what degree. And I happen to be of the belief it's a relatively small degree, and that will manifest itself in, like I said, consolidation and focus on markets where it can truly work rather than just expansion at all costs.
Right. So Jeremy, I mean, well, we started this podcast right in the middle of COVID about a year ago, and obviously a lot of podcasts, the guests there was some conversation around how this pandemic has impacted the acceleration of technology and adoption of technology. And I think from all accounts we've heard that e-commerce has probably jumped maybe 5 years in terms of adoption and growth in widespread adoption. From an industry technology perspective, how have you guys kind of adapted to that increase in demand?
Yeah. We had to really, we were already an agile company, but we had to become more agile. I mean, there was so much change so quickly. So we had to alter the way we were handling really all of our processes, whether it be implementation or the way we handle statements of work for retailers that wanted to customize our platform, handling day-to-day tickets, getting questions answered. We had to basically tear up everything and rebuild. But it also created, some level of innovation for us, where we decided to create an initiative called the GK Open platform, where we were giving retailers the ability to, create a degree of customization on their own if they have, in-house developers or maybe a local, third-party dev shop that they work with. In many cases, we were, giving them kind of the keys to build on their own. And that's something we're really excited about growing with. We're slowly but surely introducing that to more of our clients. But it was just a lot more day-to-day hand-to-hand combat. And I'm sure that's no surprise. That's probably the case for every technology company, in this space.
So from a differentiation perspective, how do you guys see yourselves? What do you think are some of the things that make you stand apart as a solution?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, the background that I mentioned, being, kind of operators just as much as a technology company. At the end of the day, I do think this is, an operations business made better by technology, not the other way around. I've said that since day one. And, I believe that that's the case even more today than when we first started. And so I think we have the ability in many cases to serve as a partner, helping the retailer think about the business comprehensively and not just licensing a solution and walking away. And I know many of our technical counterparts do a nice job of assisting the retailer as well. But I just think that given our operational background, there's potentially greater breadth and depth in what we can do, from a store level operations standpoint, everything from how to design staging areas, what equipment should be considered, what pick and pack process should be deployed, how to operate digital media. We've had an in-house team and a number of platform embedded capabilities on that front for a number of years. So, I think it's the comprehensive outlook that we take on the space, and just the way we engage with clients is pretty unique from what I've observed.
Nice.
So
I like that.
if you were to look out, 5 years into the future, what do you think grocery e-commerce looks like? Effectively like it is today, just maybe a greater portion of total sales, or do you see it significantly changing somehow?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be change. It's a complex question though, because the future doesn't look the same for everyone, and so I think you have to view it as somewhat of a spectrum in terms of the degree of change for any particular retailer. A retailer with stores largely in the rural Midwest probably is not going to have to evolve at the same rate that as a retailer with stores in Manhattan, of course. So the level of acceleration will be different for different retailers, but I undoubtedly think e-commerce will continue to expand. And I think that will lead to, more deployments of, micro fulfillment centers. And, we're obviously seeing a lot around, just walkout technology, and there's a number of players in that space. I definitely think we'll see more of that, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be exclusively that for everyone. And that's where I think there's often confusion is, how do you figure out, how to strike the right balance of, evolution and, pragmatism. And I think that's kind of like the nuance where retailers will either succeed or fail. You can evolve too quickly. That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Interesting. So do you, recently there's another e-commerce company that you're probably aware of, Freshoff, that got recently acquired by NCR. And I found that very interesting because it maybe signaled that, point of sale companies are trying to see themselves as more comprehensive store solutions, right? Where you're not just servicing the in-store shopper, but even people who shop online. Do you see that as a trend? Because it seems like an interesting direction for a POS company to go in, because they're clearly missing out on this piece that's growing pretty big from a transactional standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an example of where like lines might become more blurred. It's not about e-commerce and in store. It's about, it's about the total business. How can you improve the entire business? And obviously, as e-commerce becomes a bigger percentage of sales, maybe the importance of hardware when it comes to, point of sale becomes a little bit less important. But at the same time, there's a lot of evolution in that space, and some of the the legacy hardware providers within point of sale, I'm sure, are concerned about how can we play a role in the portion of sales that are expanding.
Right. So if you had your 3 wishes and you could wave your wand and make retailers do something that'll make deployment of your solution simpler and faster, what would they be?
The first one I think I would probably say is all 3 of them, if it's a true wish list for me. And that's, focusing on getting the business right and thinking about it comprehensively versus trying to deploy as many bells and whistles within the technology as possible. I think that's the common thread we see that retailers are often getting sucked into, is focusing so much on, my competitor has this feature, I got to have that feature too, versus, how do I just get the fundamental, business right? And how do I begin to expand with those fundamentals in place and maybe layer on, bells and whistles. So I don't mean to drift away from the question, but for me, that one thing would probably be 1, 2, and 3.
No, I think Gary and I agree with that. We've seen that a lot when we speak to retailers, and it seems like every shiny object that comes along, they feel like, they should have it because somehow it might make a difference. I guess this is kind of a FOMO, like, what if this is the solution? And so having to stepping back and looking at the big picture.
Yeah.
Not to throw a pun here, but look at the bird's eye view of your business, so to say, right? And see what's going on. No, I think I completely agree. I think there was one thing that you want retailers to do is step back. And I think we all feel that the future is going to pass us by faster than it will, but I think there's always time to step back and take a look and evaluate your approach, right?
100% agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So,
again, Jeremy, thinking of, all the retailers you work with, have any of them deployed a micro fulfillment center?
Several of the retailers we work with now are closely evaluating it. None of the retailers that we work with have deployed anything to date, though.
Yeah. Okay. And that seems to be generally the case, across the industry. There seemed to be and there was a real spike in interest around MFCs, as we got into the first few months of the pandemic and everybody's e-commerce sales were exploding. But then it seems to have calmed down. And I see a lot of retailers in that, not going to rush into this. Let's evaluate and see where to go here.
Yeah. And frankly, I think that's smart. I think getting the decision right is more critical than, getting it done today. Yeah.
Yeah. How about operating dark stores or dedicated fulfillment centers?
We've seen that, and I've experienced that. Even going back to my previous business, and I think in many ways that can, I think about it as an evolution along, the fulfillment journey. I think in many ways that can make sense as a precursor to, an automated fulfillment center. And there are, certain providers that seems like provide a better, on-ramp in that way.
Yeah.
So last week, Jeremy, we had in our episode, we were talking about, to Brandon Schultz, who's the president of the Wisconsin's Grocers Association. And we're talking about labor shortages and how it affects different aspects of their business. And I'm thinking, when it comes to e-commerce, so obviously it's labor intensive to some degree where you have people picking, but I know there's whether the retailer is supplying the labor to do that in the store or whether it's a gig economy based solution that's providing. Do you think that's being impacted with the whole labor shortage that we're seeing out there in the market?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that plays a major role in why we saw, marketplaces grow. They provided a solution to that. They offered the technology and the labor. And quite honestly, that was a major piece of our decision to partner up with Point Pickup, who has historically been a last mile provider reliant on, gig economy workers, and had started to deploy those, gig economy workers to also do in-store pick and pack. We think there is a future where, at minimum, retailers begin to outsource a portion of that activity, maybe not all of it. We certainly see the benefit of owning a portion of that experience. But due to the labor challenges, I think many retailers will not have a choice. They'll need to look to third parties to assist them, if nothing else, just out of a need to serve customers today and not having access to more labor to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Gary, I think that's a fair approach for a number of retailers that maybe can't justify dedicated resources in each store to fulfilling orders and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it even relates to this instant needs category. That is such a difficult business to get right with in-house W-2 labor. Being able to flex up and flex down based on demand versus just paying one-to-one to have someone come in and fulfill those as they as they come in. I think that's another big theme that we'll see is retailers deploying that with third parties. Obviously, we're already seeing it with Instacart, but even within their own white label solution, looking to a third party labor provider to assist them with that.
Yeah, interesting. I had a really crazy stat the other day about the labor shortage, and said there were 10.4 million job openings currently in the United States, and there's 7.2 million people looking for work. So there's a 1.25 ratio between people who are looking for jobs and jobs out there, which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
think about it, right?
Very.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy, and I wonder if even how much the gig economy has been impacted, and maybe it has not, because people find flexibility in the gig economy of being able to work on demand, and they set the hours when they turn on and off, right? And maybe it's just showing us a trend that's happening out there, that people value flexibility and freedom as opposed to fixed schedules.
Yeah. I think the gig economy has benefited from everything. I mean, there's a multitude of ways, but yeah, I think that what you just highlighted is probably the biggest theme of a greater desire for flexibility. And it allows people to have maybe a full-time position, but maybe their earnings doesn't need to, be quite as high, because they can augment that with, gig economy work as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, so you've got GrocerKey to a very nice spot. Where do you guys go from here? Where do you see the future of GrocerKey here?
Well, so now we're a part of Point Pickup, and we just made this announcement a couple months ago, but we're quickly merging our teams and our technology and our solutions to offer essentially what I just had outlined, and we're really excited about it, where we can take this model that where we kind of built up a case study with Woodman's, take all the expertise we developed, and really start to put it out there in the market at scale, where we can be a white label technology provider, but we can also come in and fully operate the business. Now we're using gig economy workers instead of W-2 workers as a result of being part of Point Pickup, but we see great benefit in that for a variety of reasons. And some retailers may elect to do this exclusively. Some retailers may want to just augment their own labor. Some retailers might want technology, and some might just want labor. And so we're excited about having all of these products and solutions under one roof, and just continuing to expand with that.
Nice.
That's fantastic. No, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. I think people listening to this episode will have to hit the pause button a few times just to collect all that and digest that. And we do have episodes here, and most of them are probably meet this, where in the course of the conversation, I don't even recall some of the statements that happened. Like, geez, I mean, Jeremy really went deep, because I think a lot of your views concur with how Gary and I think in terms of the industry and where they need to be going and how they need to be thinking. We see a lot of knee-jerk reactions happening fairly often, and we cringe at that sometimes, because you don't know what the impact of that is going to be 3 years down the road when something happens. But this has been a great conversation. Gary, anything before we close?
No, this has been great, Jeremy. I'm glad you were able to join us today.
Yeah. And Jeremy, by the way, this is to all our guests. We do send out our retail perch mugs. So if you can send us your mailing address, we'll make sure you get a retail perch coffee mug, whether you drink coffee or not. You can have whatever you want in it.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. I'll definitely put that to you.
In case you're back here, as like the future Jeff Bezos or something of grocery e-commerce, you want to make sure you have the retail perch mug with you.
I'll keep it close by.
Terrific. Anyway, listen, thank you so much for the time. This has been a fun conversation. And, I'm looking forward to this episode coming out and our listeners listening to it, because I think there's a ton of stuff that they can benefit from. Gary,
thank you both so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Gary, anything else?
No, thank you. Great to be with you.
Yeah. Well, see you guys, and we'll talk again in a week's time. And we have some more amazing guests lined up here. But, I think you've got a really, really good view from a e-commerce company's view of, where things have been, where they're going, how to make it profitable. It's just been hugely educational. If there's any new topics you want us to discuss, please do write to us. We're happy to, or if you want to be a guest on the show, write to us, right? And we'll talk to you guys soon. Be safe, and until next week. Make sure to join us every Monday and connect with us at The Retail Perch on Instagram and Facebook.
And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at theretailperch@birdseye.com.